Boeing, a symbol of American manufacturing, has suspended its China-focused operations, a move that shakes the foundation of the U.S.-China trade relationship. The August 2025 decision halts production and assembly for the Chinese market, marking a dramatic escalation in the trade war. Boeing's Zhoushan Completion Center and multiple joint ventures are now on pause, as the company cites an impossible business climate and mounting regulatory barriers. China accounts for nearly a quarter of Boeing's projected global sales over the next 2 decades. This suspension puts billions in future revenue at risk. The move is the culmination of years of rising tariffs, sanctions, and diplomatic standoffs, with multinational corporations now caught in the crossfire. Boeing's action brings the trade war's impact from theory to reality, affecting supply chains, factory floors, and thousands of jobs. The suspension draws a new front line in the trade war, right through the heart of American advanced manufacturing. The message to other U.S. corporations is clear. The risks of globalized production and deep economic ties with China are now painfully real. For decades, commercial ties were seen as a path to stability and prosperity. Boeing's move challenges that belief. The trade war has reached a point where even the most critical business relationships can be severed overnight. This is a wake-up call for global commerce and industrial strategy. The era of assuming economic interdependence would guarantee peace is over. The world is entering a new, more precarious phase of global trade. China responded to Boeing's suspension with immediate and targeted retaliation. Beijing froze all pending Boeing aircraft orders, putting tens of billions in future sales at risk. The government launched regulatory reviews of U.S. industrial contracts, signaling the fallout would spread beyond aerospace. China's Civil Aviation Authority grounded part of its Boeing fleet, citing safety inspections, widely seen as a punitive move. Simultaneously, China ramped up support for its domestic aerospace champion, COMAC, aiming to accelerate the C919 as a direct Boeing competitor. Retaliation extended to politically sensitive U.S. sectors. New restrictions hit American agricultural imports, and scrutiny increased on high-tech components and semiconductors. These actions are calculated to create economic pain in key U.S. regions, pressuring American policymakers. China's message, economic interdependence, cuts both ways, and it's willing to absorb pain to defend its interests. The government is leveraging its market to build self-sufficiency and challenge U.S. dominance. The Boeing dispute has become a national confrontation, not just a corporate issue. The economic consequences will ripple across multiple U.S. sectors. The stakes in this standoff have never been higher. The trade war is now a test of national resolve and strategy. Boeing's suspension triggered a sharp drop in its stock price, erasing billions in value and reflecting investor fears over lost growth. Production lines in Washington and South Carolina slowed, disrupting schedules and creating a logistical crisis. Thousands of workers now face furloughs, with skilled jobs and entire communities at risk. The company is left with unsold aircraft, white tails, incurring storage costs and straining finances. Supplier contracts are in jeopardy, and relationships with leasing companies are complicated by the halt. Boeing's business model, built on Chinese demand, is now exposed as vulnerable. The company must urgently rethink its global strategy as its largest market becomes its greatest uncertainty. This is not a temporary disruption. It's a fundamental challenge to Boeing's future. Boeing's crisis is rippling through its vast U.S. supply chain, affecting over 12,000 suppliers nationwide. Orders for China-bound aircraft have been canceled or postponed, creating existential threats for many small and medium-sized businesses. Suppliers who invested to meet Boeing's targets now face excess capacity and mounting debt. For many, Boeing is their primary customer. Losing this business threatens their survival and local jobs. The crisis exposes the vulnerability of relying on a few large contractors. Communities in states like Kansas and Ohio are feeling the shock as high-paying manufacturing jobs vanish. The once efficient web of interdependence is now a conduit for economic pain. Surviving suppliers scramble to diversify, but it's a slow process in aerospace. The Boeing-China dispute is a stark lesson in supply chain resilience and the risks of over-reliance. The warning is clear: global trade instability can devastate the American heartland. The Boeing crisis is a warning for all of U.S. manufacturing. Industries from autos to semiconductors now see how quickly market access can vanish. The fear of deglobalization is real, as companies hesitate to invest amid rising risks. China's state-backed champions like Comac threaten to displace U.S. firms with government support. The debate over U.S. industrial policy is shifting. Intervention is now seen as necessary for survival. The dispute highlights how supply chains can be weaponized in great power competition. America's pursuit of low-cost global production has left it exposed. The crisis demands a new strategy to protect U.S. manufacturing and economic security. Boeing's crisis is a move in the U.S.-China geopolitical chess match. Corporations are now pawns, strategic assets in a contest for technological and economic supremacy. For Washington, Boeing's fate is tied to national security. For Beijing, retaliation is a defense of sovereignty. The battle is about more than trade. It's about setting global norms and achieving self-sufficiency. Both sides use economic leverage, targeting sectors that inflict maximum pain. The Boeing case is potent. It involves high-value exports, advanced technology, and thousands of jobs. Economic logic is giving way to political calculation, risking decisions that hurt both economies. The rapid weaponization of economic ties shows how fragile decades of integration have become. As both sides dig in, the risk of miscalculation and escalation grows. The line between strategy and recklessness is dangerously thin. The world economy is now hostage to great power rivalry. The long-term fallout could reshape Boeing and U.S. manufacturing for decades. Boeing risks losing the Chinese market permanently, as China backs Comac and Airbus steps in. Regaining lost ground would be a monumental challenge, even if relations improve. The crisis accelerates economic decoupling, with companies rethinking reliance on China and shifting to more resilient, but costly, supply chains. China will double down on self-sufficiency, creating rival standards and spheres of influence. America's role as anchor of the global trading system is at risk, as other nations diversify to avoid future crossfire. The result? A fragmented, unpredictable world for U.S. industry. The crisis forces a reckoning on industrial policy. Free market ideals are giving way to strategic intervention. The U.S. may turn to subsidies and trade protections, but this risks a global subsidy race and market distortions. The Boeing crisis could fundamentally alter international competition. The stakes are not just economic, they're about America's place in the world. The choices made now will echo for generations. In the wake of the Boeing-China dispute, calls for diplomacy are growing. Business leaders and labor unions urge both governments to step back, warning that a prolonged trade war serves no one. The economic pain is real and immediate for workers and companies. Constructive dialogue is needed, but deep mistrust and political obstacles remain. Any resolution will require reciprocal concessions and a rebuilding of trust. Domestic pressures in both countries could push for compromise or fuel further confrontation. Allies in Europe and Asia are urging restraint and a return to rules-based trade. The Boeing crisis is a test for great power relations. Without a diplomatic off-ramp, the world risks a new era of economic nationalism and instability. A successful resolution could set a new framework for managing competition. The stakes are immense, and the next moves will shape the global order. Boeing's suspension in China marks a turning point in U.S.-China relations and global trade. The crisis exposes the dangers of deep economic interdependence in a world of rising rivalry. Decades-old partnerships can be weaponized overnight, with real-world costs for jobs and stability. The debate over America's industrial future is now urgent and unavoidable. Boeing is a central piece in a larger contest for technological supremacy and global influence. The risk of miscalculation and escalation is growing, with long-term consequences for U.S. firms and the global order. As the world stands at this crossroads, the challenge is clear: how to protect national interests without destroying the economic ties that underpin prosperity. The answer will define the next era of global trade and security.